The country of Iran is claiming to have taken out Israeli targets. This is massive news. Now, here's the kicker. The Israeli targets were not in Israel, they were in Iraq. Now, I'm not going to waste your time. Let us get straight to the point. Essentially, here's what's happening. Here's a response from the Iranian Revolutionary Guard on the attacks in Iraq. In response to the recent atrocities of the Zionist regime causing the killing of commanders of the guards and the Axis of Resistance, one of the main Mossad espionage headquarters in Iraq's Kurdistan region was destroyed with ballistic missiles. Now, why would Israel be in Iraq? We'll get to that in a second, but understand this. Essentially, what Iran did was a retaliation strike for things that happened in Syria in December. Let me talk about that first. Essentially, Israeli Defense Forces in the month of December shifted their strategy when it came to the air campaign or their air power. They were starting to go into southern Gaza, and there was a realization, look, let's take our air campaign away from Gaza, let the ground forces focus on Gaza, and the air campaign was focusing on Hezbollah in Lebanon and also targets in Syria. One of the targets was the Revolutionary Guard tied to Iran. And so because of this, the statement I just read was the retaliation response of taking out Israeli assets within Iraq. Now, here's what's also interesting. The targets are claimed to have been Mossad targets. So, Iran has reported this, but Israel has not responded to this. And if I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know why I said that weird. Even if this was true, the Mossad do not exist in real life. Let me explain. When you look at any Mossad type operations, they will go into clandestine operations or other countries, and they'll use passports of people who don't even exist anymore. The Mossad do not exist. They operate in very covert operations. So, if they were actually taken out in Iraq, Israel is never going to say this is true or not true. They're probably just going to ignore all of this. Furthermore, to make things even more complex, and we will get to why Israel would be in Iraq, Iran had actually taken out IS targets in Syria as well. If you don't know who IS is, you can't say their name on YouTube. Go look them up. They're the really bad group of people that everybody can't stand, to include Israel. So here's why things get confusing. Iran takes out IS. Israel, they are enemies of IS, yet Iran and Israel are enemies. You see how geopolitics is so confusing? The main point being is that it looks like Iran did a really shady operation over Iraq, saying they've taken out one of the most elite organizations in the world, the Mossad. Meanwhile, they fulfilled a duty that many people actually would applaud, and they took out IS members. So look, what Iran did essentially was like, maybe we could have messed up in Iraq, but we also did a good thing in Syria. See guys, everything is good to go. You can't be mad at us. Now, I'm going to read another statement from Iran, and we assure our nation that the Guard's offensive operations will continue until avenging the last drops of the martyrs' blood. Okay, so there's two things to understand about the specific region of where Iran struck, Erbil, Iraq. First things first, this is the home base, the headquarters of the U.S. coalition forces within Iraq. Now, nobody was hurt, and there's no specific evidence to show that Iran specifically struck this region to try and scare the U.S. military or bait them into a retaliation strike. None of this. We'll actually get into the U.S. statement soon, but what you need to understand is that currently, right now, Iraqi's prime minister is very pro-Iran. This is because there are heavy Muslim Shia ties between the prime minister and Iran. The statistic is about 90% of Iranians are Shia. And when it comes to Iraq, I think it's about 55 to 65% are also Shia. So this is the first time in a long time where Iraq and Iran are actually potentially talking together and may potentially be friends again. Now, what you also need to understand is that the United States is heavily under threat of getting kicked out of Iraq. This is because recently the United States conducted retaliation strikes of their own over Baghdad to take out a militia member who also is pro-Iranian ties. So you can see how things are really confusing. I'm trying to make this only about Iran, but you really have to paint the entire picture together. I had to put my iPad down to show you this. Now, let's talk about the U.S. response to all of this, because obviously the United States completely condemns all of this. We tracked the missile which impacted in northern Iraq and northern Syria. No U.S. personnel or facilities were targeted. We will continue to assess the situation, but initial indications are that this was a reckless and imprecise set of strikes. And we might as well throw in this statement here. The Prime Minister of the Kurdish people, or Kurdistan, had this to say. Now, understand this. Kurdistan is not actually viewed as a legitimate nation in the world, yet the United States is heavily allied with them. I know that's a whole nother video for a whole nother time, but we might as well say the statement from the Kurdistan Prime Minister. In a statement from his office, Iraqi Kurdish Prime Minister Mazar Barzani condemned the attack on Erbil as a crime against the Kurdish people. Essentially, these attacks happened over Kurdish territory, and they're saying it's a crime against Kurdistan. We never gave you authorization. So yeah, it's a little confusing, but that's what Kurdistan is saying. Okay, so is this going to be a means for war? Well, again, here's what the issue is, and I think Iran knew exactly what they're doing. First things first, we're never going to get confirmation, and I stand by this, on whether or not these were actual Israeli Mossad personnel, because again, Mossad do not exist in real life, and even if the United States knew they were there, they will never confirm whether or not this is true. Second off, look, Iran did not go after Israel themselves in Israeli territory. If that was the case, then that would constitute retaliation or maybe another war. So what it looks like is that Iran is finding a loophole using their militant groups through Yemen, Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon. But also, as long as Iran goes after clandestine units or militia units or pro-Israeli units, then they can get away with essentially anything they want. They're using this strategy in Yemen, going after civilian vessels, even going after U.S. naval ships, and no one's ever going to ground invade Lebanon to go after the Houthis, so screw it. We're just going to keep doing what we do, and Iran themselves going after these random locations and claiming them to be Mossad agent facilities. Look, as long as Iraq stands with Iran, they're going to get away with everything. So right now, things are getting very hot and heavy, and Iran looks like they're being extremely aggressive. We haven't seen this before in a long time, not specifically from the country of Iran themselves, but it looks like they feel A-okay, and they're not really worried about the presence of the United States or Israeli assets in the region. So I will keep track of all of this for you guys. Make sure to subscribe, follow, like, whatever, it doesn't matter. We're going to keep on this because I'm on day 3 in a row of tracking Iran at the time of making this video of all of these attacks they are committing, and it looks like they're just going to keep getting away with it.